There are secrets that cling to the very fabric of families, threads woven so tightly into the tapestry of lineage that they become indistinguishable from destiny itself. Some of these secrets are mere whispers, forgotten tales that fade with the passing of generations. Others are living entities, breathing and festering beneath the veneer of respectability, capable of shattering lives with a single, brutal reveal. Our story today delves into one such secret, a profound deception buried for decades, a truth so corrosive it threatened to dismantle everything it touched. Imagine a world where faith is not just a belief system, but the cornerstone of your entire existence. For the small, devout community nestled in the quiet, tree-lined suburbs of a bustling American city, the church was more than a building. It was the heart, the pulse, the very soul of their collective being. And at the center of that beating heart stood Father Michael Thorne. His name, a gentle echo of the saints, seemed to fit his persona perfectly. He was a man of the cloth, yes, but more than that, he was a pillar of the community, a benevolent shepherd guiding his flock through life's trials and tribulations. With a shock of silver hair that framed a kindly, weathered face, and eyes that held the quiet wisdom of years spent in contemplation, he exuded an aura of calm authority. His sermons were not fiery condemnations, but gentle invitations to introspection, his voice a soothing baritone that promised solace and understanding. He was the man you confessed your deepest sins to, the man who officiated at your weddings, baptized your children, and comforted you at the funerals of your loved ones. To them, he was incorruptible, a beacon of moral rectitude, a living testament to divine grace. And then there was Emily Thorne. The name alone carried the weight of her father's legacy, a legacy she both cherished and felt subtly overshadowed by. Emily was in her late 30s, a woman of quiet strength and sharp intellect, with her father's thoughtful eyes, though hers sparkled with a more modern, pragmatic fire. She was an archivist at a local university, meticulously preserving history, a calling that ironically prepared her for the brutal excavation of her own family's hidden past. She had grown up in the shadow of the rectory, a stone's throw from the church, a childhood imbued with the solemnity and grace of her father's sacred calling. Her mother, Sarah, a woman of understated elegance and unwavering devotion, had been the perfect foil to Father Michael, managing the rectory's affairs with quiet efficiency, creating a home that felt both sacred and profoundly loving. From the outside, the Thorne family was a paragon of virtue, a living embodiment of the ideals Father Michael preached every Sunday. Their life, to all appearances, was one of serene devotion and quiet joy. Family dinners were filled with lively theological debates and light-hearted banter. Holidays were celebrated with a blend of spiritual reflection and genuine familial warmth. Emily recalled her father not just as a priest, but as a loving, albeit sometimes distant, parent. He taught her to ride her bicycle, helped her with her homework, and always had a patient ear for her childhood worries. There was a gentle, almost ethereal quality to their family life, a pervasive sense of peace that made their home a sanctuary not just for them, but for many in the community who sought Father Michael's counsel. It was a picture-perfect existence, a testament to faith and familial bonds, a narrative etched in the collective memory of their town. But beneath this meticulously crafted facade, a different kind of story lay dormant, waiting for the opportune moment to tear through the carefully constructed piece. It was a story not of divine grace, but of earthly desires, of choices made in the shadows, and of lives irrevocably intertwined in a web of deceit. For Emily, the first tremor of this hidden world came not with a dramatic revelation, but with the quiet, insistent hum of an old, forgotten box. After her mother, Sarah, passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75, Emily began the arduous task of sifting through her parents' belongings, a journey through memories both sweet and melancholic. It was during this somber pilgrimage through her mother's attic, amidst the scent of aged paper and forgotten lavender, that she stumbled upon it. Tucked away in a dusty corner, beneath a pile of old photo albums and moth-eaten linens, was a small, unassuming wooden box. It was a simple, unadorned box, the kind you might find in an antique shop, but something about its forgotten solitude called to her. There was no lock, no intricate carving, just plain, polished oak. As her fingers traced the smooth, cool surface, a faint sense of unease settled upon her, an intuition that this box held more than just trinkets. Opening it, Emily found not jewelry or old letters, but a collection of seemingly disparate items. A tarnished silver locket, a small, dried rosebud pressed between the pages of a slim prayer book, and, most perplexing of all, a faded photograph. The photograph was of a woman, young and vibrant, her smile radiating a joy that seemed almost too bright for the sepia tones. She was beautiful, undeniably so, with eyes that held a striking resemblance to Emily's own, a resemblance that sent a jolt of recognition and then confusion through her. The woman was holding a baby, swaddled tightly, its tiny face turned away from the camera. There was no date, no inscription on the back, nothing to place it in time or context. Just this image, a silent testament to an unknown past. The locket, when she finally managed to pry it open, revealed two miniature portraits. One, unmistakably, was her father, Michael, though younger, his silver hair still dark, his expression less world-weary, more youthful and passionate. The other portrait was of the woman from the photograph. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Who is this woman? And why did she possess a locket containing her father's youthful image, a locket her mother had never owned? The dried rosebud, fragile and brittle, felt like a silent scream of a love long past, a love that had no place in the sacred life Father Michael had lived. This was not just a box of old mementos, it was a Pandora's box, a silent sentinel guarding a truth that defied everything Emily knew about her family, about her father, about her own identity. The meticulous archivist in her, accustomed to piecing together fragments of history, suddenly found herself facing a personal history that was not only fragmented, but actively concealed. The serene portrait of the Thorne family, the beacon of virtue, began to crack, revealing unsettling shadows beneath. The initial shock gave way to a cold, gnawing curiosity. It wasn't just the presence of these items, but the sheer impossibility of them. Father Michael, a priest, dedicated to his vows of celibacy, a man whose entire life had been an open book of devotion and service. How could he be connected to this mysterious woman, to a locket that spoke of a romantic past, to a photograph that hinted at a child not her own, yet strikingly familiar? The questions spiraled, each one a sharp splinter of doubt digging deeper into her carefully constructed reality. This was the beginning, the quiet, unsettling prelude to a truth that would unravel the very foundations of Emily's existence. A truth that would force her to confront not just the secrets of her beloved father, but the very nature of identity, faith, and the devastating power of a lie meticulously maintained. The peace that had defined her life was now replaced by a chilling realization. Her father, the saintly Father Michael, had a secret. A secret that had been buried with the utmost care, a secret that was now beginning to whisper from the shadows, demanding to be heard. And Emily, the dutiful daughter, was now unwittingly tasked with unearthing it, piece by agonizing piece. The discovery of the wooden box and its unsettling contents was the first crack in the pristine facade of Emily's life, but it was just the beginning. The questions that had been swirling in her mind, who was this woman, and what was her connection to Father Michael, began to sharpen into a cold, insistent purpose. The meticulously ordered world of Emily Thorne, the archivist, demanded answers. She couldn't just dismiss it as a forgotten romance from before his priesthood. The timeline didn't add up. Her parents had been married for over 40 years, a union that began just a few years after her father was ordained. The locket and the photograph felt more recent, more poignant, a secret held in silent defiance of his vows. Her search began with the simplest of methods, a gentle, almost hesitant probing into the memories of those who knew her father best. But Father Michael, in death, seemed as closed off as he had been in life. Every conversation felt like a dead end. His closest friends from the seminary spoke of his unwavering piety and devotion. The older members of the congregation painted a picture of a man born to the cloth, a leader whose faith was as solid as the foundation of the church itself. There was a singular, almost terrifying consistency to their stories. No one saw a crack in the armor, no one recalled a time when he had been anything other than the man they revered. It was as if the human part of him, the part that might have loved and lost, had been systematically erased by his sacred calling. Desperate for a tangible lead, Emily turned to the only physical clues she had. She took the photograph to a local photo expert, an old man named Arthur who specialized in restoring old images. He was a wizened figure with thick glasses and a kind smile, a man who saw stories in the chemical stains and faded pixels of the past. Arthur examined the photograph under a magnifying glass, his expression shifting from one of professional detachment to subtle intrigue. "This isn't from around here," he murmured, his finger tracing the distinct architectural style of a building in the background. The style of the building, the lighting, it looks like it's from the American Midwest, maybe the late 70s or early 80s. Definitely not from our coastal region. His words, a simple observation about an architectural detail, were a lightning bolt. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. The Midwest. Her father had spent 2 years there as a young priest, a brief, unremarkable assignment before he returned to their town to lead the parish where he would serve for the rest of his life. It was a detail she had always known but never considered significant. Now it felt like a key, a single, rusty key to a door she hadn't known was locked. Driven by a new urgency, Emily began to delve into her father's past with the precision of a detective. She found his old appointment books and personal journals, meticulously kept from the early years of his priesthood. Most pages were filled with mundane entries about church events, meetings, and pastoral visits. But in the journals from his time in the Midwest, a subtle shift occurred. The entries became less about daily tasks and more introspective, filled with cryptic philosophical musings and thinly veiled emotional turmoil. One entry, dated from the summer of 1979, was particularly unsettling. The lines are blurred, God help me. The heart is a rebellious thing, full of desires that defy my most sacred vows. I am a shepherd, yet I am lost. It was a stark contrast to the calm, collected persona she had always known. It was the voice of a man in torment, a man wrestling with a profound inner conflict. But the entries abruptly stopped after a few weeks, replaced by the familiar, stoic tone of a man back in control. The silence was deafening. What had happened that summer? What had caused this crisis of faith and emotion, and how had he so completely suppressed it? Emily's investigation led her to a small town in rural Iowa, a place called Willow Creek, the site of her father's forgotten assignment. She booked a flight under the pretense of a work trip, the archivist in her rationalizing the need to explore this historical anomaly. Willow Creek was a world away from the manicured suburbs of her home, a quiet, sprawling place of cornfields and endless sky. The rectory where her father had lived was now a bed and breakfast, its wooden porch worn and its white paint peeling, but its essence remained. It was there that she found another piece of the puzzle, a living piece. The owner of the bed and breakfast, an elderly woman named Martha, had a sharp memory and an even sharper tongue. When Emily subtly mentioned her father's name, Martha's eyes narrowed. A flicker of something unreadable. Was it sadness? Resentment? Crossing her face. Father Thorne, Martha said, the name tasting like ash on her tongue. Oh, yes, I remember him. A handsome young man. Kept to himself, for the most part. Though I suppose he had his secrets, like the rest of us. Emily's heart pounded. Secrets? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Martha eyed her for a long moment, as if deciding how much to say. There was a young woman, she began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. Alara Vance. She was the organist at the church. A vibrant, beautiful thing, all fire and music. She and the father, they were close. Unnaturally close, for a man of the cloth. Emily felt the world tilt on its axis. Alara. The name resonated with a strange, tragic beauty. Was this the woman from the photograph? Martha described a romance that bloomed in secret, a connection so profound and so reckless it captivated the quiet town. They would walk for hours in the fields, their laughter carried on the wind. Ilara's music in the church grew more passionate, a silent conversation with the man in the pulpit. It was a love story that was an open secret, a transgression whispered about in hushed tones and disapproving glances. But it had all come to an abrupt, mysterious end. One day, Ilara was simply gone. No goodbyes, no farewells. Just a note left for the church council, stating she had left to pursue new opportunities. The town assumed she had run away, perhaps from the impossible burden of her love for the priest. Father Thorn returned to his life of piety, his sermons growing even more solemn, his face a mask of grief and devotion. The town collectively agreed to bury the scandal, to pretend it had never happened, to preserve the sanctity of their beloved father. But what Martha said next was the true blow, the one that splintered Emily's reality into 1,000 jagged pieces. What no one talked about, Martha confided, leaning closer, was that Ilara was pregnant. She was a few months along when she vanished. Everyone assumed she went to a distant relative to have the baby in secret. And that the father, well, everyone knew who the father was. The words hung in the air, a final, brutal truth. Ilara. The woman in the photograph. The baby. The terrible resemblance that had unsettled Emily from the start. It all came crashing down with a sickening clarity. The baby in the photograph was not just a baby. It was her brother. Or her sister. A secret child. A living shadow of her father's forgotten life. A child abandoned or given away to protect the name and reputation of a man who chose God over his own flesh and blood. The meticulously built world of Father Michael Thorn was not a testament to unwavering faith, but a mausoleum of a love lost and a life denied. Emily felt a wave of nausea. Her life, her entire identity, was founded on a monumental lie. She wasn't just the daughter of a priest. She was the daughter of a man who had a secret family. And somewhere out there, a sibling existed, a testament to a truth that had been buried with her mother, and was now clawing its way back to the surface, demanding to be seen. The peaceful, quiet life she had always known was nothing but a fragile glass pane, and it had just been shattered. The cold, hard truth of Martha's words settled over Emily like a shroud. She walked out of the bed and breakfast in a daze, the quiet streets of Willow Creek feeling less like a peaceful refuge and more like the scene of a silent crime. A crime of silence, of omission, of lives deliberately and cruelly erased for the sake of reputation. The serene picture of her childhood was now a shattered mosaic, each piece a painful reminder of a lie that had been the foundation of everything she knew. Her mother, Sarah, the ever-devoted wife, had she known? Had she lived with this secret, this ghostly presence of another woman and child, for all their years together? The thought was a fresh kind of agony, a betrayal that cut deeper than any she had yet imagined. It painted her mother's quiet dignity in a new, tragic light, a woman who may have sacrificed her own peace for the sake of her husband's sacred calling. Emily felt a gnawing need for one last, definitive piece of evidence. She returned to her mother's attic, but this time, her search was focused and frantic. She tore through old journals and photo albums, not for new clues, but for any sign, any whisper that her mother had known. And there, buried deep in a bottom drawer, she found it, a small, unassuming spiral notebook. It was her mother's diary, kept in a spidery, elegant script that Emily recognized instantly. The first entries were from the early days of her parents' marriage, filled with the simple, innocent joy of a newlywed. But as the pages turned to the late 70s and early 80s, the tone shifted. The entries became sparse, filled with a quiet, lingering sadness. Then, an entry from a few months after Father Michael's return from the Midwest, a single line written with a trembling hand, "He has returned to me. But a part of his heart and a part of my own will always be in Willow Creek. God forgive me for accepting a life built on a ghost. God forgive them for what was done." What was done? The words were a silent scream. It wasn't just a love affair, it was a conspiracy of silence, a decision made by her father and others to sever a life from its roots. The guilt, the grief, the unspoken knowledge had haunted her mother for decades. Emily felt a wave of profound sorrow and a burning, righteous anger. Her parents' love story wasn't one of quiet devotion, but of a tragic compromise, a life built on the foundations of a secret buried with brutal efficiency. Driven by a desperate need to find her sibling, Emily's search became an obsession. She used her skills as an archivist, but this time, the records she was digging into were not historical documents, but the dark, winding tributaries of her own family tree. She scoured adoption records, birth certificates, and obituaries, cross-referencing names from the Willow Creek area in the early 1980s. She knew the child's birth year and the mother's name. It was a needle in a haystack, but she was a woman trained to find needles. And then, a name surfaced, a name she had seen before but never connected to her father, Daniel Vance. A birth certificate from a small hospital in a neighboring town, listing Alara Vance as the mother, and a blank space where the father's name should be. And in the corner, a small, handwritten note from a social worker, child placed in private adoption with a local family. The twist, the final, brutal revelation, came not from another document, but from a chance encounter, a fateful collision of past and present. Emily, exhausted and emotionally drained, was at a local coffee shop near her parents' home, staring numbly at the adoption records on her laptop. She was in her own world of grief and anger when a man approached her table, a man in his late 40s with a kind smile and eyes that held an uncanny, jarring familiarity. They were her father's eyes, but with a different, more intense spark. The man, a stranger, spoke to her with a voice that was calm and reassuring. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Emily froze. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and the pieces of the shattered mosaic finally snapped into place. The silver of his hair, a direct echo of her father's, the subtle lines around his mouth, the very shape of his jaw. He was a mirror, a living testament to a life she never knew existed. She looked down at the screen, at the name Daniel Vance, and back up at him. "Daniel," she asked, her voice a barely audible tremor. He nodded, a look of confusion on his face. "Yes. How do you know my name? Have we met?" The confrontation was explosive, a moment of raw, unvarnished truth. Emily revealed everything: the box, the locket, the diary, the long-buried love affair, and the secret child. She watched as a lifetime of a man's identity was dismantled before her very eyes. Daniel, who had grown up in the gentle, stable home of his adoptive parents, a beloved son and brother, was suddenly faced with a reality so jarring it was almost incomprehensible. His father wasn't the man he had always known. His father was a priest who had chosen his vows over his own son. The pain and shock on his face were a living mirror of her own. The truth of it was a shared burden, a devastating realization that bound them together in a way neither could have ever imagined. Daniel, who had always felt a subtle, unexplainable sense of not quite belonging, now had a name for the void. He had been a secret, a phantom child, born of a love that was deemed impossible and then cruelly erased from existence. But the revelations weren't over. As the two of them, newly forged siblings, sat in stunned silence, Emily felt a sudden, horrifying intuition. The man who had been Father Michael's closest friend, his confidant and spiritual advisor for decades, a man named Marcus. He had been a constant presence in her life, a gentle, paternal figure who had offered comfort after her mother's death. But in the final, agonizing twist of the knife, Emily realized Marcus wasn't just a friend. He was a key figure in the cover-up. It was his name on some of the cryptic correspondence in her father's old files, letters discussing difficult matters and a delicate situation. He had been the one to help her father make the painful decision to sever ties with Alara and the child, to protect the sanctity of the church and the reputation of its beloved priest. Marcus had not been a source of comfort. He had been an accomplice. The man she had confided in, the man who had comforted her family, was the same man who had helped bury her brother's existence. This was the ultimate betrayal, the final piece of the shattered truth. It wasn't just her father's secret. It was a secret her entire community, her entire family, had helped to keep. And now she and her newly found brother, Daniel, stood at the epicenter of a moral and emotional earthquake, facing the devastating legacy of a man they had both loved, a man whose life, to all appearances, had been a testament to faith, but was in fact a monument to a lie. The choices made decades ago had not just affected a few people, they had created a ghost family, a living, breathing testament to a life denied. And the time had come for that ghost to finally be seen. The truth, once unearthed, couldn't be put back. It hung in the air between Emily and Daniel, a physical weight, a silent testament to a life denied and a lie meticulously maintained. The shock and anger they felt were a shared language, an unspoken understanding that transcended their newly discovered blood ties. They were two halves of a whole, two fragments of a family torn apart by a choice made in the name of piety. Their initial impulse was to confront Marcus, the self-proclaimed friend and accomplice who had helped orchestrate this entire charade. But Emily, the archivist, and Daniel, the man who had just had his entire identity turned on its head, knew instinctively that a public confrontation was not what they sought. It wouldn't bring back the lost years, the missed connections, or the truth that had been denied to them. What they needed was not revenge, but resolution. Their journey led them back to the church, not as a place of blind faith, but as the physical epicenter of the lie. The sanctuary, once a source of comfort and peace for Emily, now felt hollow, its hallowed walls echoing with the ghosts of secrets. They stood in the empty pews, the afternoon light filtering through the stained glass windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the silent air. It was in this silence that they finally understood. The real tragedy wasn't the love affair, it was the life that was sacrificed for the illusion of perfection. Their father, Father Michael, had not been a villain. He had been a man caught between two impossible worlds, the world of his sacred vows and the world of his human heart. He had chosen the former, and in doing so, had broken a piece of himself and, in turn, broken the lives of those he had left behind. They realized that the most powerful act they could perform was not to expose the secret to the world, but to reclaim the history that had been stolen from them. They sought out Alara Vance, the mother they had both been denied. It was a difficult search, as Alara, having given away her son and been exiled from her life, had retreated from the world. They found her in a quiet seaside town, a woman now in her 60s, with the same vibrant eyes from the photograph, but dimmed by years of unspoken sorrow. The meeting was a storm of emotion. Alara, having thought her son was lost to her forever, was faced with the impossible reality that he was here, a grown man. She looked at him and saw the echo of the man she had loved and lost, but also the living, breathing presence of the child she had to give up. The reunion was not a simple, happy affair. It was fraught with the pain of the past, the questions of what if that hung in the air. But in that shared space of grief and reconciliation, a new kind of family was born. They didn't expose Marcus. They didn't bring the scandal to the community that had so willingly buried it. Instead, they chose to build their own legacy, a legacy of truth and acceptance, not of silence and denial. Emily, the dutiful daughter, found a new purpose in honoring the fragmented, complicated history of her family. Daniel, the man who had felt like a ghost, finally had roots, a sense of belonging that went deeper than his adoptive family, a new understanding of the man he was. He wasn't just Daniel Vance, he was also a thorn, a son of a man who was both a saint and a sinner. And Alara, the woman who had lived a life of quiet grief, finally had a reason to smile, a son to share her story with, a living connection to the love she had once been forced to abandon. The story ends not with a bang, but with a quiet, powerful exhale. The truth had set them free, not from the pain of the past, but from the burden of the lie. The life of Father Michael Thorne was not a simple parable of faith. It was a deeply human, complicated tragedy about the consequences of secrets, the sacrifices made in the name of duty, and the enduring power of family, no matter how it's formed. This is a story that reminds us that beneath the surface of every seemingly perfect life, there are layers of hidden truths. It is a story about how even the most well-intentioned lies can unravel everything, and how the search for identity is a journey that can lead to places we never expected. The secrets of the past are not meant to be forgotten, but to be understood, to be grieved, and to be healed. For Emily, Daniel, and Alara, the discovery of the truth was the beginning, not the end of their story. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, and if you've ever had a secret that changed everything, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the mysteries that shape our lives.